I'm going to go ahead and jump in. How's our day going so far? Okay. You know, that was medium for being at Disneyland. So we're going to try that again. Are we having fun today? Yeah! All right, there was the energy. Well, welcome to the Animation Academy. My name's Josh. I'm a Disney artist here. And in honor of the 100 years of Disney, we've handpicked certain characters / films that represent big turning points for the companies or just iconic characters. And one of our most successful films of all time, my personal favorite as well, came out in 1994. It's about the life of a lion cub. Does anybody know which film I'm talking about? The Lion King. Who likes The Lion King out there? Anybody? Okay, good. You guys are in the right spot. We're going to be drawing young Simba in this class. Before we get started with Simba, a few things to go over. On your way in, you met my friend Sarah. She's a Disney artist too. She's going to be helping us out during the class. She's also going to show you your exit doors. Everyone take a look at the doors you entered through. Any lead out, the one on the far right is the easiest to open. And then my last note for new artists is we don't have erasers on our pencils here, and that's because this is a rough sketch class. That means we're drawing how animators sketch. They start off light and loose, so that way they can make mistakes, and then instead of erasing mistakes, you darken in what you like, and that's really how you're going to end up with a great sketch. All right? Are we ready to draw Simba? Yeah. All right, let's get started. We're going to start off with a circle in the center of our page. You could even call it the circle of life. I'm going to start very light and loose, maybe the size of a baseball or an orange here. Very, very light. And you'll notice that I keep going over my circle until I like it. This approach is really going to help you get a better sketch. A lot of people think they have to get it in one attempt. Now, anytime that you draw characters, you want to use construction lines. And for Simba, we're drawing the young version, so I'm placing in a lower eye line. Maybe just under halfway is probably where you want to place it. Now, we're going to be drawing him in profile, and I'm going to start blocking out some of the shapes for his silhouette. I'm starting by adding in this tilting line, starting just above my construction line, and it's pointing down towards the bottom here. And I'm going to draw on another line that runs parallel to this, and this is going to go more from the bottom of the circle, same direction. Now, when you're looking at a lion's snout from the side, it has a very boxy shape to it. So I'm going to add in this slightly curved line connecting those two lines. So again, we have a very boxy jawline. I also want to add in one more tilted line from the snout, just kind of flattening out the front of Simba's face a bit. Now, the way we're going to be drawing him in this class is with a big happy smile. I always think of the scene where he's singing, "Just Can't Wait to Be King." That's kind of what we're trying to channel in this drawing here. And I've started by adding in a little letter C curve that's starting to point in a little bit. And I'm going to create a smile for him. So again, lots of energy, lots of joy in this expression. Now, when we draw our characters, especially smiling characters, we usually opt for an open mouth expression. It's a little bit more expressive and energetic than leaving a closed mouth. So I brought down a curved line, creating what looks like a little bit of a claw shape for that negative space. And then I'm just going to create this really boxy chin for him. Once you've drawn that, if you want, we can actually pause here and we can lock in this entire snout. If you've never heard of that term before, locking in just means you're going back, and anything you like about your drawing, you're going to darken it in, so it really stands out in your drawing. Anything you don't like, you're going to leave it light, so it fades into the background as you go. And as you can see from my sketch already, those dark lines really start to stand out in my sketch. This is what we want. Just make sure you're darkening in the stuff you want to see in your drawing. Now, I mentioned this film came out in 1994, and to this day, it is still the highest grossing hand-drawn animated film of all time. In fact, I believe it's only the it's still the fifth highest grossing Disney film of all time in general. But since this film, movies tend to make more money, and especially some of our computer animated films like Frozen, Frozen 2, and Zootopia, those films made even more money. But Lion King, back in 1994, made just under $1 billion, back when movies did not make $1 billion frequently at the theaters. And this movie was really game-changing because you might think, well, why does it matter how much money this movie makes? But typically, when movies make money, that changes the industry. It leads to new trends or patterns, and boy, did this film do that in so many ways. For one, this film showed executives that there is money in animation, and that it is worth taking the journey to make animated films really high quality, because you can get all ages into the audience, not just kids, to see animated films if they're operating at the level of The Lion King, right? That, in addition with, this was one of the first films to feature like an all-star voice cast. and we saw that really take off after this movie. As well as we saw popular musicians working with animated films to bring the soundtracks to life. And who wrote the music for this film?
Elton John.
Elton John, right? And so that tradition was passed on past this film with films like Tarzan, working with Phil Collins. He also worked on Brother Bear. And then even films from other studios did this. And so this, again, this film really set a new template for how to make a successful animated film. And so this movie, very influential, both at Disney and in general. Now I started creating this very boxy shape for his ear. It basically runs parallel to the top of his head, doesn't extend too much past the top there. And like everything else, you can go back and lock this in, so that way it really stands out in your drawing here. Now, since this film featured all animals, Disney did some of their traditional stuff that they did back when they made Bambi in the 1940s. And one of the things they really were made famous for during the Bambi's production, was they brought live animals into the studios, right? That had never been heard of before. And so Walt Disney was, again, very groundbreaking with things like that. And so for this film, if you were to watch like a making of, you would see live lions in the Disney studios that the artists would sit around and they would study and sketch them to really get the feel of lions, as well as other animals that you see in this film. And you might be wondering, why do they need to do so much research if the film is still kind of cartoony, right? They take liberties. Well, we as an audience, even if we're not all artists, we can pick up on if something feels right or not. We know animals, we know people. So there's still a lot of research that has to go into making these characters believable. And then once they make them so believable, the artist can then break the rules and make them a little bit more cartoony or appealing. And so this film, I really think, is kind of like a master class in blending those two things. The animals move in a very believable way, but then they take liberties not only with things like the colors of these animals, maybe some of the ways they move, but even things like all the lions in this film have eyebrows, like very human eyebrows. And that is something that they have to do to make these characters emote in a very compelling way, right? Not to shade live action films, but when you see a hyper-realistic lion, they don't emote the same way that an animated lion does, right? So scenes like the stampede scene are so much more powerful because we see the human emotion behind Simba's face, even though he's moving like a real lion. So again, I think things like that are really fascinating. Why certain films like this are just really, really interesting and powerful. Now, I'm adding in all these details to the ears, again, things that they picked up on when they were studying these lions. So I've added in this like dark patch of fur around the edge of his ear, creating what I think of as kind of like a letter L type shape. And then a lot of mammals have hair in their ears, including lions. So I'm just gonna add in maybe 3 hairs in the ear there. Now I wanna go back and I wanna finish the entire silhouette for Simba. So I'm not only locking in his neck, but the top of his head I've left light for right now. I'm gonna add in a few tufts of fluff. He's a little young to have a mane, but we're gonna have it just like a few little pieces of fluff up here. I create like shark fin shapes almost. That's the approach I like to take here. Now, what's fascinating about this film was that Disney did not necessarily believe in this movie while it was being made, and they had no idea how successful this film was gonna be. If you know a lot about 90s animation, you know that animation was really popular during that era called the Renaissance. And because of its popularity, there was a lot of demand, where actually the executives now told the studio that instead of about every 3 to 4 years releasing a Disney animated film, they wanted 1 out a year. And so that meant a lot of films were in production at the same time. They would have at least 2 or 3 at the same time being worked on. And usually the way they would group these films is they would have an A team and a B team. The A team was usually comprised of really experienced artists at the studios, and because of that, they were able to have their first pick on the more desired project at the time, right? The popular project, the one that seemed cooler at the time. And then the B team was comprised of newer artists at the studio trying to prove themselves, and they got what was ever left, right? And so at the time that this film was being made, it was the B team's project, where a lot of artists who were new to the studio were put on the Lion King project that at the time apparently a lot of people were not interested in doing. They just did not understand what this film was going to be about. The A-Team project at the time was Pocahontas, surprisingly. And if you know anything about like box office or success, you know that Pocahontas was actually the film that struggled the most during the 90s, box office and critically, and The Lion King was the most successful film. So really interesting to see how their expectations of these films did not necessarily pan out into the reception of these films. So I always find that really interesting. I mentioned Bambi a few times already. That film actually has a lot of similarities to this film. In fact, The Lion King was pitched as, we want another Bambi, essentially. And what they meant is they wanted a story featuring an all-animal cast, and they wanted it to really pull on the heartstrings, but they wanted this time to go bigger in scale. Not just a forest, they wanted a whole savanna. They wanted it to take place in Africa with all of these animals, right? So it was like Bambi with the volume turned up, essentially. First of all, I added this little S-curve right here, closing off the snout. You just want to add that in to make sure we have the different colors of Simba's face here. And then I'm also going to add in a little tiny tooth for him. But go soft here. Think candy corn. So that way he doesn't look like a villain, like Scar, right? Sharp features typically go with villains. But anyway, so this film was pitched as Bambi meets Hamlet. And so while this film was being made, they nicknamed it Bamlet at the studio. So that when they were signing on for this project, they were working on Bamlet. Because it generally follows the structure of the Hamlet story. But if you didn't notice this, in Bambi, even though there is not a song called Circle of Life, really the theme of that movie is the circle of life, right? We're watching the entire lifespan of these creatures in the woods, seeing their highs, their lows. It's a coming-of-age story. And so that's what we're seeing in Lion King, even up to the death of a parent and that grief, right? So these films are very similar. And so again, they really share a similar DNA, though again, Lion King introduced a lot of new and different tones to the film as well. I started by adding in this really high arch towards the front of Simba's face here, pulling from this construction line. What I'm starting to draw in is what's called a character mask, which is a frame around his eye. So this is not how big his eye is. He'd look a little scary. This is the frame around it. When you go back to lock in this character mask, lock in the top of the mask a little darker and thicker than the rest of the lines. And that's because this is also going to double as his eyebrows, something I mentioned earlier about the eyebrows of these characters here. Now this film, they also did a research trip to a national park in Kenya called Hell's Gate National Park, which not only allowed them to study a lot of the species of mammals in this film as well, but also the pride lands in this film are loosely based off of that national park. That's the way they look. Though the big landmark in the film, Pride Rock, is not based on any particular real landmark. That was something dreamt up by the artists at Disney. Now, inside of this character mask, I'm starting to draw in Simba's eye by adding in the bottom of his eye. It's like the letter J curve here. And then I'm going to add in the top of his eye, which is essentially the same line, just flipped upside down. For the front of the eye, add in a soft curved line here, so the eye takes on a triangular shape. Similar to what we did with the brow, we're going to make the top of the eye a darker and thicker line to create an eyelash line. And we do this especially for characters that might feel out of place if they have like really long flowy lashes, but every character still needs lashes, even if they're more subtle. So that's something you would see on Simba here. Right now his eyes look really spooky, so we need to wake him up. I'm going to add in some pupils by having him look out across the page. I'm just going to go with ovals because of where he's looking in my sketch. But if you're doing like side-eye Simba or rolling his eyes, the pupils might take on a different shape. So just keep that in mind. Just make sure the eye becomes the darkest feature on your page. That's really what makes the eyes really stand out nice and dark here. And so you really want to bring your sketch to life in front of you. Now, so another thing that they did that combined both real animal anatomy and more of a stylization is a lot of like wild cats, like cheetahs and lions. They have dark lines near their eyes, almost resembling like tear marks. And so that's something that they included with Simba's eyes. You're pulling from the front and the back of his eye to the two corners of the character mask. And then really what they did to make it more stylistic and make it more appealing is they shade in the top of the character mask, which really allows the eye to kind of glow or illuminate within this space. You'll notice all the lions in this film have this. Once you've drawn that, feel free to add in like a little jawline for him by creating a letter L shape. Just adds a bit more structure. That's kind of optional, it's if you want it. But really, that's all you need for drawing Simba. Anything else you want to add is extra credit. So if you want to draw Pride Rock behind him, or maybe Timon and Pumbaa, have fun with it. Tell a story with your drawing. That's what's fun about sketching. Once you're done adding in your extra credit, your very last step is signing your name nice and proud because you've drawn your very own Simba. All right, now that we're finishing up our sketches of Simba, did we have fun?
Yeah.
Amazing. I want to see how you all did. So we're going to end with an art show. That's our tradition. And on the count of 3, I want you to channel your inner Rafiki and hold up those boards, all right? Ready? 1, 2, 3. Let's see Simba. So cute already. I'm seeing a lot of personality and energy in these expressions. Again, it makes me think of that scene in the film. I'm seeing some side-eye Simbas, kind of sassy out there. I like it. Very nice job with all the details of the ears and the snout and the eyes. You really made the eyes stand out. Great job. So cute over here. Fantastic, everyone. Give yourselves a round of applause. These are amazing. Very nice job. Excellent work. We have classes throughout the day. We would love to have you come back and sketch with us again. If we don't see you again, enjoy the rest of your day, and class is dismissed.
Big round of applause for your artist Josh, everyone.